I never imagined the day would come when I'd stand at the edge of my own land and feel like a stranger, watching structures rise where my childhood memories once lived. But sometimes life doesn't warn you. Sometimes the betrayal comes quietly, wrapped in paperwork you never signed and decisions you never approved. And sometimes, when people push you far enough, the earth itself becomes your witness. Before I tell you how I ended up pulling a lever that changed everything, let me take you back to where this mess began, because trust me, you're going to want to stick around for this. And hey, as you read, tell me honestly, what would you have done in my place? They say every story has three sides, my side, their side, and the truth. But in this case, the truth was built right in front of me, brick by brick, without my consent. The short version? The HOA decided to build an entire colony on my land while I wasn't looking. The long version, that's the one I'm about to tell you, so sit tight, because things escalated way beyond anything you'd expect. And if you think you know where this is going, trust me, you don't. My name is Daniel Cross, 42 years old, civil engineer by degree, landowner by legacy, and apparently the last person anyone thought would fight back. I grew up on this land, running through tall grass, tracing the curves of the stream that once flowed freely, and listening to the stories my grandfather told about how we must protect what we inherit. I didn't think I'd ever have to defend it against a homeowner association of all things, but life has a way of throwing curveballs straight at your face. It all started the day I returned from a 6-month project overseas. I drove up the dirt road like I always did, expecting quiet fields and open sky. Instead, I saw rooftops. Rows and rows of rooftops. Fresh paint, uniform fences, brand new driveways, like an entire neighborhood had sprouted out of the ground while I was gone. I literally stopped the car in the middle of the road. For a few seconds, I thought maybe I'd taken a wrong turn. But no, this was my land. My land. My name was still on the deed. My boots had walked every inch of this soil, and yet here were strangers' mailboxes sitting where my grandfather's barn used to stand. Tell me, what would your reaction be if you found an entire colony built on your property without your permission? I genuinely want to know because my brain went completely blank for a minute. I parked my truck and walked through the colony. People stared at me like I was the intruder. A woman watering her lawn gave me this disgusted look, like I had stepped on her precious roses. A kid on a bicycle almost bumped into me and yelled, "Watch it, dude!" And then I saw it. The big sign at the entrance, Maple Ridge HOA Community. I nearly laughed. My land had a name now. How generous of them. The HOA President, a man named Russell Grant, approached me with this fake corporate smile. You know the type, the ones who look like they talk to you while calculating how much money they can squeeze out of you. He introduced himself, even though I didn't ask, and started explaining nonsense about community development and unused land optimization. My land wasn't unused. It was resting. There's a difference. I asked him straight up, "Who gave you the right to build here?" His smile faltered, just for a second, but then he layered on another fake one and started talking about approval from the county board. I showed him the deed. His eyes flickered. He excused himself, and for the next few days he avoided me like I carried a contagious disease. But I didn't back down. I started digging into records. I went to the county office. I found that some documents had been misfiled, others not accessible, and some lost. Convenient, right? Every time I asked questions, people got uncomfortable. Meanwhile, the HOA kept expanding construction like they were preparing for war, or maybe trying to finish before I blew their cover. Here's the crazy part. People started complaining to ME. I'd walk around and someone would shout, "Hey, you can't park there!" Or "This is private property!" And every time I'd look at them and think, "You poor fools, you have no idea where you're standing." One night, after another argument with the HOA board, I sat by the edge of the old spillway. It was built decades ago, used to redirect water during heavy rains, but over the years it had been sealed shut because the natural flow changed. But I knew something they didn't. If reopened, the floodgate would direct water right across the land they now claimed as their community. I didn't plan anything that night. I just sat there, staring at the gate, wondering how far I was willing to go. And I swear, if you were in my place, you'd probably have the same thought. When someone steals what's yours and hides behind excuses, how far is too far? The next day, Russell confronted me again. This time he brought a stack of papers and tried to convince me to sell the land voluntarily for the sake of community harmony. I remember asking him, "And what harmony is that? The one where you build on people's land without permission?" He didn't answer. He just shoved the paperwork at me. That's when I realized something. These people didn't think I'd fight back. They thought I was powerless. They thought I'd roll over. Bad assumption. I spent the next week collecting evidence, talking to neighbours outside the colony, meeting old county employees who remembered the land's original layouts. Every time the HOA pushed me, I pushed back harder, and each time I felt the pressure building, not just in me, but in the soil beneath their fancy homes. It was almost poetic. Tell me real quick, do you think Russell deserved what was coming? Because I'll be honest, by then, I was starting to think nature had better judgment than any legal system. One evening, during a heated argument near the spillway, Russell made the mistake of telling me, "You have no control here anymore. This is our land now." And something inside me snapped, not anger, not rage, clarity. The kind of clarity that comes when you finally understand someone has pushed you to the edge. I looked at the sealed floodgate behind him. For years it had remained untouched, waiting. And at that moment, I realized I wasn't the one who had been pushed to the edge. They were. The colony was built right in nature's blind spot, assuming nothing would ever happen. But nature always remembers, and so did I. What happened next? That's where things truly took a turn. And trust me, you'll want to hear this. Before I continue, tell me, if someone built an entire colony on your land, would you go legal, or would you let nature handle it like I did? Russell must have seen something change in my expression that evening, because for the first time since all of this started, he stepped back. His confidence cracked, just a little, but enough for me to notice. I didn't say anything. I didn't need to. Sometimes silence carries more threat than words ever could. He muttered something about legal consequences and walked away, trying not to look like he was rushing. But I watched him go, and in that moment, I think both of us knew a storm was coming. One of us just didn't know it would be a literal one. Over the next 2 days, rain began to fall. Not a storm, not a downpour, just steady, patient rain. The kind that soaks deep into the earth before you realize how much water has settled. I walked the land, checking the soil, tracing the old channels with my boots. The colony residents went about their days, completely unaware of the history beneath their foundations. Kids played, people watered lawns, someone held a barbecue. They lived in a bubble built on stolen land, confident nothing could ever go wrong. But I could feel it. The land felt heavy, swollen. Water always remembers its path, even when humans try to block it. And as I walked near the spillway, I felt something in my gut tighten. The kind of instinct you can't explain, the kind that comes from knowing a place since childhood. Tell me honestly, have you ever felt something deep in your bones, long before your brain caught up? That night I lay awake listening to the rain tapping on my window. Not loud, not aggressive, just persistent, like nature clearing its throat. And the more I listened, the more I realized something. They had built their precious colony right across the old natural overflow basin. My grandfather used to tell me how water once moved freely across that land before the floodgate was sealed. The HOA never researched it. They never asked. They simply built, assuming the land would stay silent. The next morning, Russell confronted me again. It was raining lightly, and he had that polished, irritated look all corporate men get when their plans hit even the slightest inconvenience. He accused me of interfering with community operations, which was hilarious considering I had done nothing but breathe near them. I asked him calmly if he had ever looked up the original hydrology maps before building. His silence answered for him. He knew nothing about the land he claimed to control. As we spoke, I noticed puddles forming exactly where I expected them to, right along the buried natural channels. The rain wasn't heavy, but it didn't need to be. The land was simply remembering. And every time a puddle grew, Russell's eyes flickered toward it. He wasn't dumb, he was just arrogant, and arrogance is a blinding force. Later that evening, I stood by the spillway once again. The sealed floodgate was old, rusted, but still functional beneath the corrosion. I ran my hand across the lever, feeling the cold metal beneath my fingers. I didn't open it then, not because I didn't want to, but because part of me still hoped someone from that colony would come forward, would talk to me like a human, would realize what they had done. But they didn't. They were too busy arguing in community meetings about mailbox colours and fence heights to worry about the man whose land they were stealing. That night, lightning cracked across the sky, one sharp white streak that split the darkness. The rain intensified. Not a gentle tap anymore. This was the real thing, the kind of rain that makes the earth tremble with every drop. I stood at my window watching the trees sway and thought, if they won't listen to land ownership, maybe they'll listen to nature. Tell me, if you were standing in my shoes with everything you own disrespected, would you step back or step forward? I'm genuinely curious how far you would go. The next morning, chaos began creeping into Maple Ridge. Lawns were flooded, a couple of basements soaked through. People rushed outside, confused, irritated, some even angry. But strangely, none of them questioned why it was happening. They blamed the weather, the drainage, anything except the truth, that they had built their colony on a place never meant to hold them. Russell knocked on my door in a panic. Not the arrogant HOA president this time, just a scared man watching his mistake turn into a disaster. "We need help," he said, rain dripping from his hair. "The drainage system isn't built for this kind of water." I told him, "That's because this land was never meant for houses. You built over the natural runoff." He didn't argue because he couldn't. The truth had finally caught up to him. As he walked with me toward the spillway, trying to explain how he could fix everything legally if the water stopped, something inside me settled. I realized he still didn't care about what he'd done. He cared about losing control. That was the moment I knew what I had to do. We reached the spillway, the sound of rushing water echoing in the storm. Russell kept talking, promising me compensation, negotiations, board votes, but his voice had turned into background noise. I stepped closer to the floodgate lever. My hand hovered over it as the wind whipped rain across my face. "Daniel," Russell said, "don't do anything stupid." I looked him in the eyes. Stupid was building a colony on someone else's land. And then, slowly, deliberately, I pulled the lever. The old gate groaned like a beast awakening after decades of sleep. The ground vibrated. Water surged forward, not violently, not destructively at first, but with purpose, reclaiming its forgotten route. Russell stumbled back, shouting something drowned out by the roar. And as the water flowed steadily toward the colony, weaving along its ancient path, I felt something unexpected. Not triumph, not revenge, but justice. Pure, unfiltered justice. The water didn't demolish the houses, but it flooded them enough to force every resident to evacuate. The basements filled, the streets turned into streams, the yards became marshland, and for the first time, they understood what it meant to settle on land without knowing it. As emergency trucks rolled in, Russell looked at me with a mixture of anger and realization, but he said nothing. He knew legality had left his side the moment nature joined mine. Over the following weeks, investigations began. County officials uncovered the unauthorized modifications, the hidden approvals, the forged signatures. The colony was deemed unsafe. The HOA dissolved, and one by one, residents moved out, leaving behind the shells of their rushed dreams. I stood there on the final day, watching the last moving truck leave. The land was mine again, not because I fought with fists or lawyers, but because I trusted the earth my grandfather taught me to respect. And as I sealed the floodgate once more, I whispered, "We're even now." Tell me honestly, after hearing everything, do you think I went too far, or was this exactly what they deserved?